maybe I'm just impatient.
In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on July 14, 2011, to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Eckert, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Bogacheski?
Here.
Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mrs. Haas?
Here.
Mrs. Haley? Mr. Kinst?
Here.
Mrs. Lay?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mr. Rosenberg? Here. And Mr. Patton?
Here. Our first item is review and approval of minutes. So we're going to review, and I will. Can you hear me at the camera? Okay. I will remind everyone, seeing as how I needed the reminding, that you speak into your microphone so that they can hear you at home. We're going to start with review and approval of minutes, so we're going to do both. If there is a correction or problem, we will correct the official record and but approve them at this time. All right, so we're going to start with the June 1st, 2011 public session. Please review, and then we'll do the motion and second and vote. Yes.
The first, in the first paragraph, I believe the date is wrong. It's listed as the 20th.
Is that the special? Which one is this?
It was the public meeting.
Special invitation. When it says special invitation. So. Right, it's the this one.
You got that? All right, seeing no issues, I need a motion
So moved.
and a second. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And abstention?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Mrs. Bogacheski and Mr. Kinst. All right. Moving on to the June 1st executive session. Please review them for a moment. Where the date is correct. All right, seeing no objections to this, I'll take a motion
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
Mrs. Bogacheski and Mr. Kinst and Mrs. Lay. All right, moving on to the June 13th, 2011 public session. Please review for a moment. right. I will take a motion. And a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Mr. Kinst.
On page 2, in the paragraph that talks about Mr. Bambix, speaking about the fourth line down, it said that he did not run in April because he did not think he had sufficient time to devote to it. If you can add due to business issues that had since been resolved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. President,
Yes.
could we have the volume up a little bit? I'm having.
Yeah. I don't know if these are very live. They are?
No, usually it's louder in the room. Nobody can hear it.
Okay. Do you want me to,
The
repeat
external
myself?
speakers may be low.
There we are. Or-
That might be better, thank you.
Good call. Yeah, go ahead and say that again.
All right, sure. It was in the minutes, it talks about each of the candidates for the open board position. In there, under it's on page 2, paragraph regarding Mr. Bambick, there was a sentence in there that said, he did not run in April because he did not think he had sufficient time to devote to it. And then I asked if you can add, due to business issues, that it's since been resolved. I remember that from his presentation.
I remember that too. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? This was a marathon session. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
I don't know. You were there.
Not for all of it. Not for all of it.
She got sworn in. Okay. Can abstain. All right. Moving on to the June 13th, 2011 executive session. Please look it over quickly. All right, I'll take a motion. And a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Mr. Kinst?
On page 2, the first paragraph, I guess the second
That is
active.
not
yeah,
true.
I don't agree with that characterization.
I do not either.
Okay.
There was a discussion.
Yeah, if you strike out the second half of that sentence, that would be.
You may just strike the whole line, maybe. I mean, the first section just has discussion. Oh,
and then
sorry.
Strike the second sentence.
Sorry.
Yeah, strike out the
I
second
think you just
paragraph.
strike the whole sentence. The first statement has regarding discussion, and if we're going to strike the other part and just say there was a discussion, we've already said that.
Yes. Yeah, right there. At the end of board for the first paragraph, right? Or first sentence,
Yeah, put a period.
period. Strike the second sentence,
That would be fine.
and then the last sentence is okay.
Yeah.
Sound good? I agree. All right, anything further? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And abstentions?
Abstain.
Definitely on that one. All right, moving on to the June 20th, 2011 public session. Please review it quickly. Hang hang on. We have two of them, right? We're going to vote on the two public sessions as one, if everybody's okay with that. 2.4 and I believe 2.5 attachments.
2.6?
2.6 is the executive session. We'll do that separately. As 2.4 is essentially the meeting to go into executive session.
Understood. You said we're going to approve 2.4 and 2.5. My
Correct.
copy of the agenda shows that 2.4 and 2.6 as the public.
Is that correct?
2.5 is the executive.
2.5 is the exec.
Oh, okay. You're right. You're right. 2.4 and 2.6. There's not much to 2.4.
Yeah. I was hoping we didn't spend too much time on 2.4.
Yeah. All right. I will take a motion at this point for 2.4 and 2.6, so two public sessions. And a second?
Second?
All right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And abstentions? All right. Moving on to the executive session. All right, I'll take a motion at this point.
So moved?
And a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And abstentions? All right. We're finished with the minutes. We have our correspondence listed on our agenda. Any question about those? No? All right, moving on to the superintendent's report. Oh, Mrs. Lay.
Yeah, for the one from Learning Express, since it's a purchasing, regarding purchasing, what happens to that? Like, what happens next?
I, in fact, sent an email today to Jerry, Iman, and Jordan, asking them to look into whether the process could, we need to follow all the rules and the policies of the board, but if all things being equal, I think buying locally is smart. And if they are a reliable provider of services to us, then we certainly, and also a benefit. I know they do nice things for our homeschool associations and other school-supported things. So I asked them to look into that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by sharing some great news about one of our students. Ayush Garadia, a sixth grader at Auten Road, took on a science challenge from his science teacher, Mrs. Lynn Minio. The optional assignment was a project using the rules from the Discovery Education 3M Challenge 2011. The project involved identifying an everyday problem regarding either the manner in which people move, or methods for keeping healthy, or doing something to make a difference. The students had to create a new solution to solve a problem. Ayush's problem was to reduce the number of car accidents. He proposed placing magnets in the tires of cars and also in the road. His video explained how this could be accomplished and how it would impact the community. Students from all over the United States in grades 5 through 8 were eligible to participate in the 2011 3M Discovery Education Challenge. There were 10 finalists and a merit winner from each state. Ayush was the merit winner for the state of New Jersey. Congratulations, Ayush. Wonderful news. All right, I'd like to turn our attention to the Building on Excellence report, which is a starting point document to discuss our strategic plan or revisions to that strategic plan. This had been called prior the 100-day report, and it's my pleasure to walk you through the report that I submitted to the board a few weeks ago. This report will be made public shortly. The purpose of this report is to inform our decision-making process, and it's based upon my first 100 days as your superintendent. And I'm making recommendations in 3 areas of district function: education, operations, and human resources. In the areas of education, operations, and human resources, I've divided it down to certain subsections. So in the category, the chapter entitled Education, it's broken into student achievement, technology, staff development, and programs. Now, before I go into each of those, I'd like to spend a few minutes on the charts that I gave to the board that describes our student achievement slightly differently than the way we've been looking at student achievement in the past. What you're seeing behind me is a chart of 7 years of student achievement from our state assessments in language arts literacy. Basically, it aggregates all of the scores from grades 3 through the high school proficiency assessment, through 11. And beginning in the year 2006, we have scores from grades 3 through 8 plus grade 11. In 2004 and 2005, we just have scores from grades 3 and 4. We don't have 5, 6, or 7, but we do have grade 8 as well as grade 11. What this chart shows is basically a percentile ranking of how well our district performs relative to all other school districts in the state of New Jersey. This compares our performance, relatively speaking, to about another 500 districts, including charter schools, in our state. And as you can see, for language arts, if we kind of compress all of the grades and we aggregate them into one result, and we aggregate all of the state results into one result, this is our composite testing percentile state ranking for language arts. And I want to put this into context. New Jersey's performance, when we compare how well this state does relative to other states in the country, New Jersey typically ranks in the top 10% of all states. That means we're ranked either first, second, third, fourth, or fifth across multiple grade levels, across multiple subject areas that are tested. So New Jersey itself is a high-performing state when compared to other states in the nation. What this shows is how well we rank in the state of New Jersey. So as you can see from the bars, we're about in the 80th percentile, sometimes slightly above, sometimes slightly below, but really in the top fifth of a state that is performing in the top 10% of the country. So as I've mentioned during budget time, as we talk about performance as well, this is very high performance. That doesn't mean, however, that we couldn't be doing better. The next chart is where we are in mathematics. The first thing you can appreciate from the chart is a significant incline in performance between the years 2004, 2007, and then a decline between the years 2007 and 2010. Our performance profile is typically above the 75th percentile statewide, in the top quarter of the state that functions in the top 10% of the country. When we look at our science performance, we are lower. In fact, our recent years is slightly below the 70th percentile when we compare ourselves to all other districts in the state. When we begin to tease out that data and start to look at it at the grade level, it helps us to understand and appreciate about the grade level differences. And it helps us to understand what these scores may or may not mean for us. This chart behind me shows how well we do for each grade level, starting in 3rd grade in black and going all the way up to the HESPA in the light blue on the extreme right of the chart. So you can see that, relatively speaking, there's a lot of variation when you look from one year to the next. Different than the first 3 charts that I showed you, this chart is not comparing how well we do relative to other districts in the state. This chart shows us how well we do relative to other districts in our same district factor group. And a district factor group is a grouping of districts that have like socioeconomic status, have like levels of income, similar levels of education of parents, similar levels of home prices, those type of things that make up the socioeconomic indicator. We are in the I district factor group, which is the 2nd highest district factor group in the state of New Jersey. J is the highest. The lowest district factor group is the A districts, which are typically your inner city urban areas. The I district factor groups have typically about 90 or so districts. So this compares our ranking relative to about 90 other similar districts. Now, one of the things that you may want to notice is where the 50th percentile is, which is in the middle of this particular group. The I and the J district factor group districts are typically the highest performing districts in the state. Not always, but typically the highest performing district. So as you can see, at times we are above the 50th percentile, and at times we are below the 50th percentile. In some grades, we haven't been above the 50th percentile during the 7 years of these data. And if you notice, for grades 5, 6, and 7, we only have 5 years worth of data. It doesn't go back the full 7 years. I also want you to appreciate that there is a good amount of variability here within these charts. That we don't see a relatively smooth slight increase over a period of time. We see some spiking achievement. This is in language arts, by the way. The next chart is in mathematics. Again, we see some range in our performance, including some lower performance relative to other I district factor groups as we get into the middle and into the high school years. And again, we can take a look at that 50th percentile mark as being at or above the average I district factor group performance. This is the science performance, which is only in 2 grades, in grades 4 and grade 8. Again, almost always below the district factor group average. The next group of charts is a cohort analysis, which means it follows the same group of kids from one year to the next. So what you're looking at now, especially the different colors, represent the different grades. So if you look at the first cohort, which is cohort grade 3 in 2004, that means that that group was in 3rd grade during the 2004 school year. So the next bar there, the beige bar, is that same group of kids when they went to 4th grade, and then the blue bar is when they went to 5th grade, and so on and so forth. So what I want you to kind of zero in here is that this is the same group of kids, and over a period of time, we once again see this spiking achievement phenomenon. That sometimes the same group of kids, if you look at cohort grade 3, in 3rd grade is less than 20th percentile, and that same group, by the time they go into grade 3, 4, 5, 6, they are at the 70th percentile. Same group of kids, and then dropping back down to the 30th. Again, there's not that kind of even, predictable achievement profile that we see in other areas. That's language arts. This is mathematics. And the achievement spikes are even greater when we look at this particular chart. Now, I know I'm going very quickly through it, but the my takeaways from looking at these performance profiles basically says this, that our achievement, if one would predict how well kids in Hillsborough would do, we should be performing at about where the average, maybe even slightly lower than the average I district group. The percentage of children that we have that are at risk or on free and reduced lunch or are where English is not their first language is typically higher as a percentage than most I districts. So for the most part, this achievement is what one would predict our average achievement would be. Sometimes we're actually a little bit above what one would predict our achievement would be. But what I'm also taking away is that there's a lot of variability within grade level performance as well as the aggregate performance, and we need to drill down to understand why there's less consistency within our performance profile. And as a result of that analysis, I'm making the following recommendations to our school board. And again, I want to emphasize that this is a starting point for conversation about a new strategic plan. But these are what I would recommend that the board take a serious look at. The first is to develop a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, interpreting, reporting student achievement information. I think we gather a great deal of information, and we do a great deal of analysis of that information. I would like to see that to be more systematic over a long period of time and not just measure achievement towards a proficiency standard, but also look at relative rank. And the reason that I think we need to look at that as well as looking at proficiency is that sometimes the test is a little easier. Sometimes the test itself is a little harder. And we could get a false sense of security that we're either doing better, or we can get a false sense of concern that we're doing worse if we don't look comparatively and take a look at how other districts' performance is relative to our own. So this is a very data-rich analysis, but it is only based upon one achievement test that's given once a year. So there are limitations to it. My suggestion is that we have very predictable ways of analyzing student performance data that not only includes proficiency, but also comparative analyses. The next, which is relatively common sense, we should have common assessments. If we have common expectations, then the way that we're evaluating student performance should be similar, if not identical, if you're teaching a particular course. Or teaching a particular grade in a particular subject area. That level of common expectation and common assessments will help, I anticipate, to have less spiking of achievement. The achievement will be more predictable and consistent through the district. We also need, and we're beginning this process, to gather data in a much more efficient and systematic approach. The board has invested in the Genesis system, which is a student information management system that will help us to do this very part. And a very important part of it is to be able to collect the information efficiently and analyze it effectively so that we can make good decisions about how our kids are doing. The next is our process of goal development. I have already begun the process with the the leadership team, to put our goals in terms of the SMART analysis, where you're looking at goals that are specific, that are measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. This is a very important part of how we determine whether or not we're getting to where we need to be. Goal setting and the management of goal attainment is going to be something that we're going to be focusing as a leadership team. We also need to develop metrics that measure growth. It's not just that we attain a standard, but that we take children from where they are to where we want them to be. I have had experience with some of these systems that do that, but what I've learned through my experience in other districts is that teachers, parents, other stakeholders need to feel comfortable with those measures. It can't just be imposed upon them, that they have to be part of the process to determine what those metrics should be, that they are broadly supported, and that we use it formatively, not just summatively, not just at the end of the year as one assessment, that we're looking at that periodically, we're gathering up those measures, they're collectively and broadly supported by our teachers and analyze them appropriately. The next section, other than student achievement, is technology. And board members, if you have questions during my presentation, please don't hesitate to stop and ask them. Of course, we'll have hopefully a spirited discussion about this at the conclusion of my presentation. First is to do what we're already doing, which is to make sure that we have the infrastructure within each classroom so that a teacher can throw up on the screen anything that they wish to throw up on the screen, that the kids can hear anything that the teacher wishes them to hear. Currently, we are installing digital projector units in every single instructional classroom in the district, as well as sound field systems. So we are moving in that direction. The board has already approved that. So the infrastructure, our ability to project images in a large group setting, is done effectively. Next, we need, of course, to understand what effective integration of technology is and begin to make sure that we train and plan and have a clear understanding of what that vision is. What is it going to look like when we observe teachers using technology effectively, and kids, of course, using technology effectively in instruction? I'm suggesting that we fund an innovative practice grant program, that we can generate, and we do this as a board, that we set aside some monies to encourage teachers to be more innovative, that we use this as an opportunity to be focused on some research and development within our district. We are at a precipice of a fundamental shift in how technology can be used to enhance instruction. And we need to encourage our teachers to be vanguard in this approach, that they are leaders in trying new things and working with kids to really advance the technology in a meaningful way. One of the ways that I would suggest that we can leverage new technology is through a process called asynchronous learning. Typically in instruction, we have 8:30, the bell rings, and the kids walk into their math class. They learn math for 45 minutes. Then the bell rings and they move on to their next subject. Technology allows us to do a lot of learning outside of the time frames that we set up for kids to learn. That's a relatively artificial time for kids to learn. Some kids may want to write in the evening, or some kids wake up early in the morning to do different things. Technology can provide a way to access those type of learning experiences. Another area that we'll focus on is globalizing the curriculum, breaking down the walls of the classroom and bringing in resources from around the world. And we can do that in real time. We see some examples of this already going on in our district, but it's not common practice. We need to make it something that all opportunities to globalize the curriculum are experienced and that teachers embrace. The opportunities are endless. The ability for teachers to link up with other teachers from around the world is already there. People are already doing it. And when we have the right infrastructure, which we're currently putting into the classrooms, it's a relatively simple process. And with good training, this can be not the special lesson, but this can be something that's typical. Another area that I feel is essential is providing all teachers in our district with portable computer devices. Whether it's tablets, whether it's laptops, teachers need the opportunity to be able to take their technology with them throughout the classroom. They need to be not tethered to a wall as they currently are right now, that their computer setup is networked, hardwired to a wall, that these would be wireless devices that they can move throughout the classroom and take them home. Districts that have done this, and there are many districts that this is the common practice, find that teachers are even more effective and put in more of their own personal time into lesson planning and other type of technology. It also makes it it's much more efficient when that technology can come with the teachers. I'm suggesting that we do this within the next 4 years. I would also suggest that we phase it in over the next 4-year period of time. I'm also suggesting that we begin to explore the possibility of moving to a one-to-one initiative where each child, each student in grades 5 through 12 within the next 5 years has also their own one-to-one computing device. Whether that's an iPad, whether that's an Android tablet or a personal netbook. This will allow for the type of full utilization of technology that other districts are already doing and finding great success with, that I believe strongly that we should be moving in this direction. There is some outstanding resources that are available now, and they're just starting to hit the market, of e-textbooks that are truly value-added. The board will hear a brief report from members of the curriculum committee on a pilot that I will eventually recommend to the board to begin exploring some of these e-textbooks, where embedded within the textbook are tutorials that are video, where that children can take assessments within the device, and that they are transmitted directly to the teacher's website, and the cost is actually about 60% of what the actual cost of that textbook would be. So my point is that the costs are coming down on these, and it's only the beginning, but the value is enhanced. This will not occur, even if there is a commitment on the board and the community to move in this direction. It will not occur effectively unless we invest in staff development in a very serious way. Teachers need to feel comfortable and confident in using these technologies. This is a paradigm shift now. It's not a small change. And the type of staff development and the importance of doing it well cannot be said enough. Now, in the area of staff development, one of the things that we would like to commit to is a teacher training teachers model. Rather than pulling in a lot of outside consultants, that we leverage the experts in our school district, and there are many of them, and develop that expertise even more so that teachers are learning directly from their colleagues. Who best to help a teacher learn how to integrate technology in their second grade classroom than another second grade teacher that understands that curriculum, that understands the children of that particular age group better. So this is the direction that I would like our district to begin moving into. We are committed to our professional learning communities initiative. Dr. Antunes has done a wonderful job leading this initiative. We have programs in all of the schools. And with the cooperation of our teacher association, we have now put it into the collective bargaining agreement that at least 2 meetings a month will be dedicated to teachers, collaborating with teachers, having these professional conversations about how our kids are learning, how well they're doing, and making the improvements necessary to optimize our kids' experience here. I also feel that we can't develop our leadership team without having specific staff development directly targeted at the challenges of leadership. It's not enough for our leaders in our district to attend all of the staff development opportunities that our teachers have. Our leaders in the district have very specific roles and responsibilities, and we need to invest in their training specifically as well. In educational programs, I have 2 recommendations. The first is really a compliance issue. We are currently not compliant in the area of elementary world language education. We need to put a program together, and we have plans to try to do that hopefully by January of this academic year coming up. There's a task force that's studying what type of program hopefully we can generate, and we are discussing different funding streams that we'll be able to do this, hopefully in January, but this is an important part of making sure that our students are properly educated. The next is to implement a science, technology, engineering, and math program. STEM is the acronym, for all students at the middle school. I have to tell you, and I've said this at this dais, that I've been overwhelmingly impressed by the work of our robo-raters. And that model of kids collaborating with other children and designing, implementing, actually machining, developing a robot is something, the only concern I have about that program is that it's extracurricular. We should have programs like that that's part of the curriculum, that all of our students have the opportunity to experience this. I don't know how it would fit in, but we should begin the conversation about talking about it so that every child has the opportunity to go through that. A very meaningful, that I would argue should be modeled after what's already going on at the high school with our robo-raters, and pull it down into a program that all children have the opportunity to go through. Now, in the area of operations, operations is broken into 3 different areas: finance, facilities, and governance. In the area of finance, and this is going to be very challenging, I have mentioned items that may have dollar signs that's attached to it, that all of these areas that I've suggested in the prior slides would be funded without increasing the tax levy beyond the 2% cap. All of those educational needs will be completed without extending our operational expenditures beyond the 2% tax levy. That will not be easy, but that will be our challenge. I'm also suggesting that we move forward with a variety of green initiatives, and that the savings that we will realize from the green initiatives, that we take half of that savings and appropriate it to the innovative practices that I mentioned in the previous slides, and take the other half and give back to our community in the form of property tax relief. Third is to take full advantage of all of the grant opportunities at the federal, state, and local levels. We've also begun this process, which to explore revenue generating. In order for us to allow our district to grow in the ways that I'm suggesting that it grows, we will also need to be very creative at how we bring additional monies, non-property tax monies, but other monies, into our district to help support other programs. So we need to continue our focus on finding other revenue generating activities that are aligned with our district mission. We are fortunate that we're going to be opening up our CAP program, which is our program for our half-day kindergartners to go, CAP standing for Children at Play. We will be hosting that in 3 out of our 6 elementary schools, and it looks like we'll be about breaking even. So the first year, we're not going to go into the red with it. We anticipate breaking even. Of course, that we hope that we'll actually have more than that. We'll have more children participate as the year goes on. But that's only the beginning. We need to look in other areas such as summer schools, which we talked about before. We talked about adult schools, and the more that we can focus in on this area, the less pressure we have on our operating expenses to look at it through what's raised through taxes. We have a relatively new budget and accounting software system. We are going to fully operationalize that. Currently, we did not use the budget side of that software. We will be doing that. It's something that affects all budget managers in the entire district, including principals and directors and other top administrators in the district. This will also allow the board to see other detailed financial information so that we can make well-informed decisions as we move forward. Next is the area of facilities. This is an area that we need to pay attention to very carefully. This has been the area that, as we've run into difficult financial times, has been, we've divested. We need to reinvest in our facilities, and the first step in that is to make sure that our facilities plan is up to date, as well as our maintenance plan. develop a comprehensive preventative maintenance, and establish, and this I think is very important, clearly articulated priority ordered listing of all capital and maintenance projects, and commit to fund them over the next 5 years. The board has, and I applaud this, made a deposit to our capital reserve. That is the first step in doing much of this type of planning. We were successful at completing on time and under budget our roofing projects. We need to paint our buildings periodically and make sure that that we do kind of the little things that can make a big difference, such as working collaboratively with our HSAs to focus on beautification projects throughout the district. And I think we'll have a great deal of support from our parent group in doing this. Now, another big area in facilities is the idea of moving forward with green initiatives. Specifically, we need, and we've already begun this process, but we need to complete it, evaluate all energy consumption and do our benchmarking by facilities and compare our annual savings building by building. We've started this process. We need to expand our heating and cooling control systems to every school. We currently have it, I believe, at 3 schools currently. We want to do that in all of our facilities that we have. We see significant energy savings in the first year or two. Then that, you can't get the savings every single year, but you see a big drop. One of the areas, even with the Energy for America, that I feel that we have a great deal of opportunity for additional savings is in electrical savings. And much of that can be done through minor behavioral change. We have seen districts, in fact, neighboring districts. Bridgewater Raritan did a very nice job with having teachers change and students change behavior, that little changes like turning off the lights, turning the computers off, those type of things have saved significant monies over a period of time. So we need to look at not only changing control systems, but also behavioral change. We need to complete the process of comprehensive energy audits for all of our district facilities. In fact, in order to move forward with some of the more creative ways of dealing with being more energy efficient, the state as well as other government agencies require these type of comprehensive energy audits. And finally, to look seriously, if not implement, power purchasing agreements that will allow an outside vendor to come in and to use the surface area on our roofs and in other places in the district, including parking lots and other land. And they will, as a result of using our facilities for that, discount the energy back to the district. They will also fix roofs. They will also, as part of that process, and will have to be costed out, so the discount wouldn't be as significant. But there's ways of actually offsetting certain capital improvements to the district, which we know we're going to need to be making soon, by using power purchasing agreements. So that's something that the Facilities Committee has already been in discussions with. The board has had some briefings on it, but we need to get involved with this in an in-depth way. Now, under the area of governance, I'm suggesting that the board consider piloting a new committee structure that is aligned with this particular process of looking at education, human resources, and operations as the 3 major committees. And I'll go through what that means in just a moment. We currently have a process in the district of having a committee of the whole meeting, kind of a work session, as well as an action meeting. A district this large to only have 1 action meeting per month can be problematic in terms of making adjustments in payroll, in paying bills, and taking other action like appointments. That my suggestion is that we is that we eliminate the work session and replace it with an additional action meeting. Those of you that have been watching our meetings over a period of time have realized that we have taken action at both meetings during the month, typically. So this shouldn't be as much of a significant change. But the meetings won't be one right after the other. They would need to be spread out. I'm actually suggesting that the meetings take place on a Thursday so that the board has a weekend plus a few days during the week to review carefully the agenda and get your questions back to administration so that we can respond prior to the board meeting. Now, currently the process by which we take minutes is spotty at best in our committees, and I would suggest that that responsibility become an administrative responsibility, and that the board members on the committee review the minutes that are drafted by administration. That those minutes include very clearly defined action items, which are recommendations to the full board, and as a result of those, of documenting those action items over an extended period of time, we can then pull them together for an end-of-the-year evaluation, that we can actually track all of the actions that took place within each of our 3 committees. And here's the bullet to consolidate those committees. Each committee would have an administrative liaison. Scott Rocco would be the administrative liaison to Human Resources. Lisa Antunes would be the administrative liaison for Education, and Ayman Mahmood would be the administrative liaison for Operations. I would sit at all committee meetings, and the committee structure themselves and how to be on those committees would be slightly different than what we had before. There would be 3 standing members within each committee. Our board president would have a permanent seat on each of those 3 committees. The administration will draft all committee meeting minutes ready for the committee's approval. As I said before, at the end of the school year, we would pull all of that together so that there would be an end-of-the-year report, and that would help us also to make adjustments to the strategic plan. The focus on trying to align our governance structure to the strategic plan is to keep our focus on the bigger ideas that we need to spend time, effort, and energy on as a school board, that you will be fulfilling well your oversight responsibility by having clear alignment to what that strategic plan is. I'm suggesting that all of the minutes be made available for the public as well. So the public can review them. They would have redactions on them based upon what we could not share. There would be certain items, in particular in human resources, or if we're involved in negotiations, those type of things would certainly not be available to the public. Those are our executive items. Before I go on to human resources, the other part of this, which is listed within your report, is that we would also have an alternate process. So if a board member could not make the committee meeting, another board member could fill in, with the idea that we would always have at least 4 board members attend a committee meeting. I think that that would help in a couple of ways. Number one, more board members would participate and have a have a better understanding of what's going on and and how that's communicated to the full board. Number one. Number two, board members have interest of participating in multiple committees. This would be an opportunity in order to do that. We currently have a process where each board member, with the exception of the board president, serves as chair as a particular committee. So we have 8 standing committees currently. In order to maintain a chairpersonship, what I would suggest is that we rotate the chairs. So every 4 months, we would rotate the chair so that every board member has the opportunity, if this is an option that the board wishes to consider, to chair the committee during the year. In terms of mathematics, by the way, everyone would sit on 1 committee permanently. The vice president would sit on 2. The president would sit on all 3. So again, if one board member, whoever that board member was, could not attend that particular board meeting, an alternate could come in, sometimes maybe two. In fact, today we had a committee meeting and 2 board members were there. So this option would allow for more board members to participate in that process. Again, what I'm asking the board to consider is that we make these changes in a pilot way. We try it out for 6 months, and then we make a determination in January whether or not we want to continue. And if we don't wish to continue in January, then we revert back to our old committee structure. And if we do wish to have this new process become the way that we do business, then we would change policy at that time. The board currently has a bylaw that's very specific about the committee's structure. It's a very detailed one. And in order for this to become something that, that would be permanent, the board would need to change it. The board doesn't need to change policy for a pilot, but I would ask that you would consider this as a pilot. And I will ask that either at the end of this meeting or at the end of the meeting on the 26th that we make a decision whether or not we're going to move in one direction or the other. There is a great deal of backup administrative work that occurs in order to make this 3-committee structure actually work. So if we are going to move to the alternative, I ask that the board let me know within a week and a half or so, and then we can get the ball rolling, or we can get the ball rolling with our current process. Okay, in the area of human resources, one thing that is very important changes that are happening at the state level is that there's going to be a change in the way that teachers are evaluated. Currently, or what is being suggested, what I anticipate will be the practice, is that half of a teacher's evaluation will be based upon student achievement data. Currently, the state of New Jersey, Department of Education, is analyzing all of the state data that they have in order to provide districts with information regarding how individual teachers are performing relative to that data. So we will have that information, how we use that information, and more importantly, what indicators we're going to use for student performance that will translate into how we evaluate teachers is very, very important. And the devil's in the details with this. What I am suggesting is that the district begin the process of working with teachers, not against teachers, but with teachers, to develop these type of systems that are also broadly agreed upon by the instructional staff, that these are the metrics that we are using and feel comfortable with, that can help us make informed decisions, not only about student performance and program evaluations, but what we will eventually have to do, which is to evaluate teachers based upon student achievement data. Now, I want you to understand where I'm coming from with it. I have no problem evaluating teachers based upon how well their students perform. And the reason I don't have a problem with that is if the alternative is to ignore any indicators of student achievement. Teachers matter, and the teaching profession matters a great deal. So how we measure that is very important. So we're going to need to spend a year studying this, talking about this, working with our teachers on developing these type of assessments that will be used to not only evaluate programs and student performance, but also will be used for evaluating teachers. Principals are not immune to this either. They will also have a revised evaluation form. Now, this is actually a good time to do this. Our teacher evaluation methodology, as well as our principal evaluation methodology, has not been reviewed in many years. Scott, maybe 20, 15 years? I mean, it's been a long, long time. Okay. 15, am I about right there, Barbara? 15, 20 years? Yeah, it's been a long time. So we should do this anyway. even if it wasn't being directed from the Department of Education. This is an important process, that whatever teacher evaluation system that we're going to work with, and remember that the student achievement data represents only 50%. There's also another 50% that is all about observing behaviors. So that part of it should be research-based and should be something that, that helps us improve the performance of our teachers. This next part is about our support staff receiving professional development. We don't have currently a well-articulated staff development program for our clerks, our secretaries. We do have one that's well articulated for instructional aides, especially with our special needs children, but not as much for our support staff, and we need to do a better job in that area. One area that Dr. Antunes is going to be intimately involved in is to develop a teacher leadership institute. We're very excited about this process, to pull in all of our staff development under one umbrella, eventually becoming like a Hillsborough University. So we have a lot of very exciting ideas to pull in all sorts of staff development that includes every person that works in the district. And then if we do a really good job with it, we may be able to open it up to people from outside of our district as another revenue generator. So we're very excited about this program. Mr. Rocco is going to be very much involved in this as well. Next steps. From here, my suggestion is that the board engage in a comprehensive strategic planning process. To begin with, we need to see what our current strategic plan is, see what parts of it we wish to continue, see what parts we wish to discontinue, and look at this particular document as a starting point to start to develop a revised plan. My suggestion to the board is that we hire a consultant, a firm from outside that does this type of work professionally, that they can build broad support, and that they can help us to develop goals and objectives and a plan that will guide our decision-making for the next 5 years. I also suggest that that process of reviewing a few firms be delegated to one of our committees. I'll leave you with a quote that I use as part of the budget development process, which is a famous quote from Henry Ford: "Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success." This plan is only as good as how well we're able to work together to implement. And hopefully we can now begin the process of starting to define a new vision, building upon excellence of the programs and the people that we already have within the district, but taking our next steps forward. With that, I'll open it up for questions, discussion.
Would the public like to comment at this time on the superintendent's report, which includes the his building on excellence report? All right. Seeing no comment from the public, I'll go to the board at this time. Mrs. Lay.
No, go ahead. I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead.
I have 2 comments. Is it Genesis is the student achievement? No? Is Genesis the student achievement package?
The Genesis is a student information management system. We're able to put into that system student achievement data. It also has a online gradebook that is available for parents to see and to use. But we want to use one system and one data warehouse in order to analyze our data effectively. Currently, our process is multiple spreadsheets that we keep, and that is an inefficient way of recording the information. So the data will be in the Genesis system. We're able to mine that. We're able to analyze that data.
And that's the one where it can become informative and that we can track students' progress, not at the end, but throughout the year?
Throughout the school year, that's
Okay,
correct.
okay. Because
But it really depends upon common assessment, so that if everybody's doing different things, it's very difficult to track improvement over time.
okay, but we're using Genesis in order to have the common assessments.
Well, we're using Genesis as, basically Genesis is a relational database. It's just a very large database that allows us to put the information in and to get it out in a way that's very efficient. So for example, if a teacher, if teachers in third grade agree that this assessment is a very important assessment, that all third grade teachers are going to be giving this assessment, and that assessment then is a grade within the teacher's grade book, then the teacher records that grade once, that a parent sees that grade, and that if we need to mine that data to analyze it, we can pull it from them. We don't need to ask people to keep separate databases. We don't need to do any of that.
Right, okay. The reason why I'm asking is because Judy and I went to the Lighthouse Project, Iowa Lighthouse Project workshop, and we were blown away by the results, and you need a system like this. And in addition, you need strong board support for this program, and also community support. We need to, I think it's great to have this, because if we can capture that a student isn't understanding the information and that they can remediate either with technology, with online learning, or having the teacher work with them, and not at the end of the year say, oh, they didn't get the material. That's what the Iowa Lighthouse Project is going for, and I'm really motivated to see that we have that. And the second question I had was that, and actually, so can we have a presentation sometime in the following year about how you're cutting the data and how you're using Genesis?
Absolutely. I would anticipate that the board would be very interested in student achievement data, and again, a committee would be responsible for oversight of that particular area of the strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And part of it is to make periodic reports back to the committee on how we're achieving, how we're moving forward.
Okay, thanks. And the second question I had was that there was one slide that had it said teacher to teachers, teachers training teachers.
Yeah.
And it just came to my mind that for you have a lot of motivated teachers. You have teachers in our school district that are learning the REACH curriculum, and so what's important is that they have strong administration. So what I'd like to see is you talked about administrative development, but if we could have principals training principals so that we have very strong leaders. When you have great teachers, they need strong leaders. So.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, Mr. Gillette.
I'm going to defer to
Okay.
Mr. Kintz. He has a lot to
So yeah, just a few points. Thanks for doing the report and presenting it, not only to us but to the public. I felt that this was refreshing, very thorough, holistic, a lot of data driven, which is valuable to me. Also strategic and forward looking. So I think for the areas that are in your realm, kudos. There's some fine-tuning on the committee piece, which is probably more near and dear to our hearts because that's why we're here. I support the going to the 2 action meetings. I think it's just necessary, and we take a lot of action during the normal working ones, anyways. Shifting days is going to be, I think, a challenge because just for tradition and not only for the people who participate up here on the dais, but also everybody else around. With regard to the committee minutes, I'm supportive of that because I think the greater transparency we have with the public, the better. The fact that the administration is happily volunteering to do that is a plus as well. On the committee structure, I like how you're consolidating alignment with regard to the administrative areas, human resources, education, and operations. Although I do see that there are some areas that I would characterize more as pure board responsibilities. So those are policy, strategic plan. Those are I see as being more board responsibilities, and those are lacking. And then finance, from an oversight perspective, we're elected by the public to oversee, make sure that their money is spent wisely. And so I think looking at things differently, consolidating some, I think we can fine tune that and come to a happy agreement between just overall among the board members.
May I just mention one thing? Thank you. May I just mention one thing about policy? The idea of eliminating the policy committee is based upon the idea that people who developed the expertise in the area that policy would fall under would be best advised to make those policy changes. So if it was something that was facilities oriented, that policy would go to operations, and those people in operations that typically deal with facilities would be reviewing that particular policy.
I would expect we'd be getting that input anyways. And then the other piece too is just from the board perspective, if there are only 3 and a board member serves on 1, the rotating every 4 months I think is going to be quite disruptive. And also, while we may not need to serve on 3 committees, I think it's valuable for board members to serve on more than just one, because there are skills and talents and experiences that we have that can add value to beyond just one committee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Gillette.
Thank you, Dr. Paget. Dr. Schiff, thank you for your report. There's a lot in here. I knew we shouldn't have let you change the carpet, because now you're changing everything. About the strategic plan, the one we're currently working under, is it less than 3 years old, Scott?
It's about 2 years old right now.
About 2 years old. When we worked on that in the summer, I guess 2 years ago then, we hadn't had a new strategic plan for 7 years or more, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years. So I understood the need to do it 2 years ago, but we just had one 2 years ago. So not that it's a criticism, but we worked hard on that too, and we had broad community support. We had board member, we had everybody on that. So I'm a little shaky on the strategic plan. Now, on some of the things that Tom mentioned, I can't see going to a different day of the week. As far as the idea that we can have the backup materials, the packet, if you will, for a few more days, we can have that now. If you're going to give it, 4 business days before the meeting, we can still get it 4 business days before the Monday meeting. I don't understand why we can't get it on a Wednesday or a Tuesday. If you're prepared to give it on a Friday for a Thursday meeting, then let us have it on Wednesday for the Monday meeting. I don't think that makes any sense. As far as the committee structure, I don't think rotating chairs would work. I understand the time it takes, for especially the administrator's time, to meet, committees, 8 committees sometimes a month. Sometimes if there's a lot going on, a committee may meet more than once in a month. That takes a lot of time. In the past, we've been able to mitigate that somewhat by occasionally having the same 3 board members on 2 different committees. If you did that a couple of different times, you certainly could sit down with Personnel/Negotiations Committee and, do the personnel agenda items and then do the negotiations agenda items. The same maybe for Facilities/Finance. You could still have you could still have an individual chair for each of those committees, but they could be the same people. You'd come in once for a meeting. It might be a compromise, a solution, because I think what you're trying to do is respect board members' time and certainly give administration more time to do their work, and I'm certainly for that. Let's see, I had one more thing I wanted to mention. I can't remember. All right, well, that's enough for now. Let me give it to somebody else.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bogaczewski?
I was just going to say that being new, it really doesn't matter to me, so I will support with whatever the board has to say about the policies and how many group meetings that they feel that they need, so you definitely have my support with whichever way. I mean, I really couldn't tell you how I feel about that because I wasn't there in the past. It really doesn't matter what days you guys want to meet. I'm here no matter what day. So, and I enjoyed reading the 100 minutes. Thank you for taking the time, Dr. Sheff, and presenting that to us. And I support Go Green. I think that would be very positive for our community.
Thank you.
Dr. Rosenberg?
Thank you. I found this report to be enlightening and very well done. I think it's the first really strategic analysis of our district that I've seen since I've been on the board, and before I was on the board as a parent, I've never seen anything quite like this. I think there are always things in here that we can improve, but I think this is well done. I also think that even though there is a strategic plan in place, the strategic plan that's in place, I think, needs to reflect Dr. Schiff's recommendations. So I think we need to go back to it. I think we need to do it again because we've invested so much effort into looking more strategically going forward. I think the committee structure that Dr. Schiff has proposed, I think, is actually quite a breakthrough. I know that having sat on several committees and chaired several committees over the past years, we've always needed the input from other committees. And I do think, from a policy perspective, that policies that deal with facilities should be dealt with people who have the background in facilities, et cetera. And so I think that's actually a smart move. I want to comment on a couple of things that I think we ought to consider that aren't in the report, and I think there are just three that I'd like to make note of. The first one is under technology, and you know, I've discussed this with Dr. Schiff, and he understands, and we've had a nice conversation about it. One of the things on technology that wasn't in the report was the use of resources. Now, this could be library resources, digital resources, et cetera. We talk a lot about putting the technology in the classroom. We talk a lot about training the students and the faculty to use technology and the wonderful things that it can do, and I support all that. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure our kids can do research, they can access resources, et cetera. So I think it's an appropriate time also to look at digital resources, from the library to the internet to everything else, and see how that fits in. I also think that the mention of STEM is a great move forward, and I applaud the idea of introducing science, technology, education, and math into the intermediate school, but I think that's not really enough. I don't know why we don't have a basic introduction to engineering course in the high school, technology courses in the high school. I think the high school also needs to reflect it from an academic perspective. I think while we have good science programs and good math programs, integration of those programs is what engineering is about, I think. And I think we need to explore that. There was two more somewhat minor points. The report didn't deal with where we're going with extracurricular activities, and I don't want the public to think that we're abandoning sports and music and art and all of those kinds of things, and I think there's some strategic work we probably have to do there. For example, the relationship between extracurricular activities and academic credit and things like that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was there was nothing in the report about one of the overarching goals we have in this district, which is to prepare our children for college. We don't talk about strategies for going to college, and I think that also, it may not be part of the strategy, but certainly the strategy, it should be the result of the strategy, that we have our students are accepted at more colleges, we have more diversity of the colleges that they go to, et cetera. So those are some of the things that I think we could tackle in the strategic planning process that I would want to bring to the table. Other than that, again, I commend the district for doing this. This is the best analysis of where we are and where we need to go that I've seen in a long time. Thank you.
Chris? Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I think I'm last here, so I agree with most of what I heard. I'll let you go last, Judy. I heard a lot of good comments, so I'll just go to some of the things that haven't been discussed or my own thoughts on these. As far as moving the meeting to Thursdays, I understand the idea behind it and the goal behind it, but I'll just put my own personal take on this. That would be horrible. Because, and I think I may speak for a lot of us, that during the week, I'm very busy. And having the weekend to review, to prepare for a Monday meeting is critical to my ability to actually have time to look into this. So if we get something, although you think about it, if we get it on Monday morning, it's ready for Thursday, 4 days sounds like a lot of time, but 4 days during the week, and I'm just speaking for myself, 4 days during the week gets me...
Can I interrupt? Their plan is to give you it on Friday.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard 4 days, that's why.
And then you would have the weekend, and then the days afterwards to communicate with people in the office, instead of having the weekend and then maybe Monday being able to catch them on a day.
Okay. Correction noted. I heard 4 days. I thought that's what Monday. I would still say that's not going to help. Again, my own personal situation, I just don't have a lot of time even to do the follow-up. So I mean, I think moving it there, if it helps the administration, certainly I'm open to that. But I think as a board member, it won't improve my ability to prepare, because the weekend is when I can prepare. And so if the goal there is to give board members more time, I'm not sure if there are other board members who are in the same kind of situation. It may not really accomplish a lot there. So just my thoughts on that. As far as the committee structure, I certainly do not advocate change for the sake of change, but in the same sake, I don't advocate status quo just for the sake of status quo. This committee structure has been around for a long time, and sometimes we do need change to make us look at things a little differently. So I think the idea of changing our committee structure is a good idea for us to consider and look at how we approach the details of getting our job done. We have these meetings, but so much more goes on in the committees and in our interaction with the administration, and rethinking how we do all that, I think, is a good idea. I do have one question, though, and forgive me if I'm not up to date on the current laws, but if we have 3 board members, president and a vice president, doesn't that make that meeting a quorum?
No.
If they're in the president of the meeting?
There would be no more than 4 members on the committee. The math works out where everybody sits on one committee with the exception of the board president, and then you have one more opening, and that would be filled by the board vice president. So in order to have all
I had to
of
write
the-
it out.
Yeah.
Okay, the math.
Well, you have 12 seats that are open. 3 of them would
I
be
thought there
taken
was-
up by this. 3,
Okay.
2 taken up by Mark. That's 5. And then you would have the rest, 7.
Okay, so that's not in addition to the board
No,
members?
it's not.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a quorum.
Okay. With regard to performance, I realize we're talking about moving forward, but I think we need to look consider what we're using as the basis for the comparison. You put up a number of different charts and statistics out there. The 2 that I think are things I would ask that we definitely use as some basis as we go forward. One is to compare the district factor group and not the whole state. Yes. I think, and not because we look worse against our DFG than we do against the state, but I think that's really the fair comparison and what our public has a right to expect us to be aiming for. Is improved performance in the district factor group. The other thing that concerns me, and I know there's it's statistics and there's not always a lot of reality behind it, but there's some very wide variance, as you pointed out. But I would expect with our class sizes, such as they are, the entire class, roughly 600 kids per class, that we shouldn't see the kind of variance that we saw. And I think that's something we need to look into. And it may be there's an explanation, whether it's the test or whatever, but I would think certainly in the district factor groupings where it was a measure against other schools that should be like us, a direct comparison to them, we shouldn't have dropped or risen so much. you know, we have a large enough student body that we shouldn't see that wide variance in there. So I think that's something we need to consider. And finally, I think, and this is a little bit further out in the future probably, but as part of the strategic planning, I think it's critical that we have significant public input. We were elected to come up here and make decisions and drive this district forward. But when we talk about strategic plan, I think it goes beyond what this board thinks or where we want to drive the process, but there needs to be significant public involvement in that process, however we decide to go forward on the strategic planning. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the strategic plan. You know, all due respect to how we went through it, I got to say, I've done strategic plans at work and other places, and they usually don't excite me. And maybe it's because while I look at this document, it's sort of visionary. It's what it tells you where you want to be in 5 years, what you're adding or how you're changing. I think when we looked at our strategic plan before, it seemed to not have this sort of concrete what you're doing, what you're going to be adding. It was we sort of want to improve in this area, and we want to be the top in this, and you know, I just think that maybe melding the two with more of a vision of how you're going to lead the district forward would be a definite advantage. I think that's why we hired a superintendent. They're supposed to be the sort of visionary of where the district is going, and I enjoyed this document more than I remember ever enjoying a sort of report in terms of getting me excited of, you know, there's lots of things in it that I realize that are sort of, you know, once again, visionary. You may not see them. You know, I'd like, you know, getting a computer to each teacher, that might be doable. It's not nearly as expensive as getting a computer to each student from grade 5 through 12. But it's visionary. We would like to be able to do it. Let's see what we would have to do that sort of thing. But it would definitely be something in the future. You know, I totally agree with the data and analysis portion, especially comparing to your own district factor group. You do have to do apples to apples, district to district, and see how we're comparing. I also like the idea of using the metrics that happen over the year. When we did, we brought in a consultant to talk about executive compensation, and he was from Colorado, and they had come up with a method of, or they were using a method of tracking student progress over the year, and this same sort of doing metrics over the year to see how those students were improving. And that way, you know, if you see the student's trajectory start to go down, you can identify it quicker and deal with the issue. And it was a model I think this is what is speaking to, and would be great for this district, great for the students. The new software will assist in that. So I totally support this sort of looking more into the data, being able to, you know, not teach to the test or something like that, but be able to measure the student and see how they're doing over time. And that way you see, you know, who needs help and who's going above what they usually are and who is going below. I like the idea of learning outside the class. I understand in some classrooms, I don't know if it was a charter school or something in New York City, where the idea was that you would watch the lecture at home, and then in class you were doing more of the homework and getting help from the teacher there. I know my own child has been watching lectures on planets and whatnot from Khan
Academy.
Right. And being interested in those sort of things. So exploring technology in that way. In terms of the committee structure, you know, I was listening to some of the comments were made. If you know, you talk about overlapping, or Greg talked about overlapping some committees having the same people on them. Well, if you make operations that way, you've essentially overlapped. You've taken two different committees and overlapped them with the same people. So we had, special projects. At times it's very useful. At times it has not nearly enough to do. Negotiations happens, for 2 years and then they're off for a year or so. So really the 8 committees we have, some of them are much more busy and some of them are less busy. So I can see how this aligning our sort of district goals of operations and HR and education to the committee structure would be useful, and I'm willing to try it for 6 months. If it's not working, then we can go back the old way, and it's nothing really lost. I like the idea, even if we don't go to that committee structure, I like the idea of the minutes and the transparency, and it's not just transparency to, well, it's transparency to the public, but also, this board member gets to see the minutes from your meeting, and it isn't nearly so much of a surprise when something comes up at a board meeting. So the sharing would go on. Once again, if you're only in this system, if you're only on one committee, but you get to see the minutes on all the other committees and what they're doing, then you're actually more aware than you were before, even though you're on 3 committees. So I would say that we could give it a try for 6 months and see how it works out. Mr. Gillette.
Steve, I just want to say that, I volunteer for a lot of things. I'm chair of, charitable organizations and chair in Township boards and commissions. And in my experience, and being on this board, my experience, a lot falls on the chair, which is a good thing, but now that's going to be 3 times as much falling on the chair. I don't think the rotating works. I think you need to have the chair throughout the process, throughout the year, and that's going to be a lot on the chair. So that's one thing. The other thing is procedurally, please tell me I get to vote on implementing some of this stuff. I've been sort of stymied in the last several months of not being able to cast a vote. Couldn't cast a vote on eliminating 50% of extended school year for some of our neediest kids. Couldn't have been told by Mr. Fogarty, who's in the room tonight, that you don't get to vote on when board meetings occur. Please tell me we get to vote on some of this. And if we go to a plan where there are only going to be 3 chairs, is the policy still going to be that the board president names the chairs? That's a lot of responsibility too. Thank you. Steve?
Dr. Rosenberg.
In thinking about this and thinking about my experiences on committees, almost always you end up in a committee and at the end of the year, you don't get as much done as you really wanted to. Curriculum committees or other committees, we have legal stuff we have to do, and then we don't really get into the nitty-gritty. My guess is that these committee meetings, there'll either be more meetings a month, instead of 1 a month, there might be 2, or they'll last longer. They'll be structured better. The other point about the chair, I'm sympathetic to the fact that the chair may have more responsibility, but I think there is an intent, and Dr. Schiff, correct me if I'm wrong, of you call them the liaison. The liaison being a much more active administrative support person to the committees than in the past. So I think that would be useful. The last thing on the committees is we're not really on one committee, because if you look at HR, you're technically it's one committee, but it's personnel, it's negotiations, and whatever else it is. So it is simply a merging of multiple committees into fewer committees. But the overarching thing for me, the overriding thing for me, is that these committees are dealing with related issues, and therefore they can see the relationships between personnel and negotiations, and between finance and facilities. I think that's where I think a lot of the benefit is going to come. I want to comment on one other thing that I didn't before, and that was Dr. Schiff talked about 50% of the evaluation being on student performance. I want to ask a question and make it clear about what student performance actually means. Now, I know we're not going to get into a whole big definition here. A lot of it needs to be worked out, but in my view, it's continuing progress, so that clearly the most at-risk students will not do as well as our AP students on certain things, but that shouldn't be a factor. The factor should be moving our children forward in a progressive way that they're expected to move, and that's how we would look at the performance of the teachers. Am I correct?
The state is going to require growth measures, so from where they were and where they end up at the end of the year.
Okay.
Mr. Pulser.
Yes. Two things. One, to your concerns, Greg, about the committees. One, I don't believe there's anything in our policies or regulations that dictates that a chairman cannot delegate tasks within the committee to other committee members. So certainly if there's a concern that a chair is going to have to carry too much of a burden, that I think that's always an opportunity. I mean, we have a chair, but that doesn't mean nobody else in the committee can do anything. So I think to that extent, if there were a larger topic that was taking over the work of the committee in the short term, there's no reason that couldn't be delegated so that the chair doesn't have to carry everything. And to the question of the president making those appointments, I think that's good, bad, or otherwise, that goes with the job. I mean, that's part of what, when we make a choice, and having been in that seat, you know, that's part of what we're deciding when we pick a president. That's somebody we want to lead us, and we're asking that person to take on what sometimes can be tough decisions, and that's part of what we're doing when we make that decision. So I think that's what I would expect to have happened there.
And in terms of vote, I don't know if it would be a formal, I mean, I figure we could do a straw poll. Does that count as a vote, Greg? A straw poll, you know?
Well, if we're going to change to Thursday nights, we're not going to vote on that? I don't get it. I don't understand.
Yeah, we can. I guess we can vote on it. I mean, straw poll, same sort of straw poll. We can vote on it.
If we're going to change, even for a pilot program, are we not going to vote on it? Are we going to go home and tomorrow night get an email from you, Dr. Padgett, and saying, okay, I want everybody's input. Are we doing this or not? And we're just going to like email you back? That doesn't make any sense.
No, we at the meeting. Unfortunately, I can't make the week from today, but I mean, come to a conclusion at the next meeting.
And I would suggest that the board formally vote, and we have a roll call, and we'll everyone can express their opinion on whether or not they wish to change the board meeting to first and third Thursdays. If the answer is no, then the answer is no. If there's conflicts, you know, let us know if there's a compromise that's out there. I understand from a couple of board members that the first and third Thursday actually conflict with certain township standing meetings, so we wouldn't want to do that, but there may be second and fourth Thursday. I mean, there may be opportunities to take a look at it. Maybe Mondays, maybe it's Thursdays itself, Wednesdays we could look at, or we don't change, and that's fine too. We would then back up our procedures so that board members had more time rather than just over a weekend to review the board minutes and backup documentation, which is significant. So, you know, you need time in order to review it carefully. But yes, there should be a board vote. It should be clear, and it should be roll call.
Thank you.
Mrs. Haas.
I'll start off by saying that I am not available on the first and third Thursday nights, one of which because I'm on a board that you appointed me to. The other one I'm not giving up either, and the people just elected me to a 3-year term, so I would like Thursday, first and third taken off the table. I don't expect to be disenfranchised, nor do I expect to disenfranchise the people who elected me to be here. Second, I think that this report, while I think it's wonderful that you went through all of this research in terms of our district, takes on a lot of administrative responsibility at the expense of the board. I think a strategic plan is only as good as a board's commitment to it. And being the most senior member of this board, I can tell you that over the last 6 years, every election brings a sea change in what the priorities of the board has been. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration in doing strategic plans. As Tom mentioned, 2 years ago, we had a strategic plan. There was a lot of effort put into it. Now that gets tossed out the window. Steve mentioned the executive compensation plan. We paid money for that, and when it came to executive compensation, it was not used. I think we need to look to some degree at our history. In terms of some of the committee changes, I have a real problem with it. I think that there has never been a bar to documenting committee meetings, and I don't know for sure that that should be an administrative responsibility. The committees were structured to be supervisory to the administration. Now the board is basically ceding that responsibility to the administration. I find 3 committees being isolating. I think everybody's going to get pegged into one of 3 committees, and despite the fact that we have minutes, we've always had the agendas, and we've always been able to look at those agendas and ask questions of each other about what was going on. In the past, and maybe Chris can remember, we used to have committee assignments where people would, like, if you were on the finance committee, the 3 people on the finance committee weren't also the 3 people on facilities committee. It was like finance would have 1 person from personnel, 1 person from finance, and 1 person from PIC. Yeah. And that would be the way that committees would be integrated, even though we had quite a few of them. And I think it worked more collaboratively that way. I don't think we should have the same people making all the decisions in one area. And I am going to speak, as I've spoken to, for the policy and communications committees, because I don't think they will get any attention being part of the 3 operational areas. I think it'll be everybody's last priority. I think policy is the single most important thing the board does by its report, you know, by its responsibilities. I don't think people with expertise should be doing it. I think people with a respect for the law should be doing it. I really and very, very seriously have a problem with that. I think that if you insist on going into this committee of having 3 committees, they should be committees of the whole, as we are giving up work sessions, which I've considered probably more productive than our action meetings in terms of discussing things that are coming up. And I also would caution the board about revenue-generating activities becoming a major priority for the district. I think it's wonderful to generate money that's not tax money, but I think we have a very limited administration. It's always been a pride of ours that we can carry on with limited administration. And I think at some point when you have revenue-generating responsibilities, they can take over, and they should not take us away from our core missions, which is education, when last I looked. I'm very concerned about the committee structure. I think it's a mistake, and I think the board needs to maintain a certain level of responsibility for what we're here for. So,
Dr. Rosenberg. I'm not reading it the same way. I don't read any removal of our responsibilities in these committee structures. I see the administration taking over more administrative tasks, and as a member of a committee, I not only appreciate that, I think it'll make the committees more efficient. And also standardize a lot of the reporting that gets done and all of that. There's nothing in this document that I read that says the administration is going to make decisions that board members make. With regard to people being on different committees and being disenfranchised, you know, in my 6 years, I've never been on the finance committee, and when we do budgets, you know, I'm one of those people who sits on the outside and has no idea what's going on in the budget meetings. And we, you know, every year we get into this discussion about when are we going to hear about the budget, et cetera. But that's the way it works. I don't feel disenfranchised. It's just the way it is. So I don't know that having finance and facilities at every committee meeting being together and talking to each other hurts. I think it helps. And same thing with personnel and negotiations. We also, it's sort of an inefficient use of our time to have special projects and negotiations that often don't meet. To have a communications committee that has no content, it's really taking communication ideas from every other committee to put forth. It seems like the committees are more disenfranchised. I look at this whole thing as an efficiency move, as a way to get more done in a shorter period of time. I think everybody would agree that the committees don't get as much done as they'd like to. I think with the exception of the Finance Committee, which has some legal deadlines, they have to get things done, and the Policy Committee, which is driven by state law. But some of the others, we don't get as much done as we'd like to, and I think one of the reasons is because we're only dealing with a slice of the overall responsibility. So I would be in favor of trying this out. I think there's no downside to doing it, and we can learn as we go along. I also think that it's a good time to rethink how we run the business here. But I don't see any usurping of our authority at all. Last question. We're talking about voting on whether we move to Thursday, or voting on this or voting on that. I'm a little confused as to how we're going to deal with this. So we can't vote on every paragraph. I don't know that we can vote on every recommendation. How are we tactically going to deal with approving this document?
Well, what I suggest is that you wouldn't be approving the document, that the document's function is to begin the process of reviewing a revised strategic plan. But there are certain procedural things that would need to occur that the board needs to vote on. The one that's probably most urgent is the committee structure and making a decision whether or not the board wishes to pilot it. The board can vote tonight. The board can wait until Tuesday night to vote. If there is a vote to move forward with the pilot, then I would be asking for dates and days of the week that are convenient for the 3 standing board members and the board president on each of the committees, and then we would begin to schedule those out for the next 6 months, and we would begin that process. If the board chooses not to try it for 6 months, then we continue with the process that we currently have. And if we wish to make changes to the meeting dates for the remainder, I would start making the changes in September through December, and then we can see, we can see if we want to make changes further on down the road. I do want to say this one thing, that I appreciate all of the concerns that have been presented here tonight, and I think that if the board does choose to try it, that I would be committed to trying to address the concerns that have been presented here, and that should be the standard by which we would make a determination whether we continue it as a part of our practice after January 1 in 2012.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
I guess this is for Dr. Schiff. Do any other school districts set up their committees like this? I mean, I do read School Board Leader, and they refer to on your negotiations committee, on your policy committee, on your, personnel committee. I never hear them referring to any structure like this.
We had 3 standing committees in Readington. That's how we worked it. I learned from that process some things that worked, some things that didn't work. This is a different board. I think that I would certainly enter into a pilot with an open mind that it may not end up that way come January. It's certainly a big change, and I know that is a shock to the system, and the concerns that are raised are reasonable and legitimate, and something that we need to consider making adjustments to as we begin to implement, if that's the will of the board.
Mr. Pulse?
Just a quick point about the trying out the committee structure. I would advocate that if we decide to try that committee structure, that we go longer than through the end of this calendar year. I think, back to what you said, Mark, I think about whether or not this is an efficiency gain. I think long-term it can be. I fully expect that in the short term it won't be. It's part of the change and figuring out how we're going to do things in the future. So I think in fairness to the idea, I would recommend that if the board decides to go ahead with that we give it more time to play out, because I do honestly believe that the first couple meetings may be less efficient as we figure out our new way forward. And in order to give it a reasonable chance to see whether or not it could succeed, I think we would need longer than that.
Yeah, give it an option for a contract extension. Mrs. Haas?
And a committee to be named later.
Yes. Mrs. Haas?
Yes, I actually did that. Surprise, surprise, I've actually done the research. And South Brownbrook has 3 committees, and Bedminster has 3 committees. All of the other towns in Somerset County have 5, 6, or more committees, including some boards that have like a ton of ad hoc committees. But almost every single one of them has a policy committee, human resources committee, curriculum committee, and some combination of operations, facilities, finance, and budget being at least 2, if not more. So, and many of them have community relations or community engagement or communications committees. Many of them have co-curricular committees, which was interesting. So that's just what everybody else in our county is doing.
Thank you. I have one more then. You just reminded me, Mrs. Haas, that a couple years ago, some board members did suggest that we have a committee that with oversight over extracurricular athletics and all that. I wonder if that could be put into one of these 3, where that would go.
That would fall under education.
Okay.
We used to have an athletic strategic plan as well.
We still have that.
Haven't seen that in a few years.
Well, if you feel you have enough support to call a question tonight.
I'd like to try it. I'd like to suggest we try it tonight, unless we.
Missing a board member.
Yeah, but we're going to be missing one next week, too. Or 2.
Maybe missing 2 next.
Yeah, we're missing at least 2 next week. Or more.
Mark,
Well, Steve's on, I'm on next week.
Are we not going to give the public any time at all to absorb this?
This is just for us to absorb, right? The format. So let's just talk practically here. If there's 1 person missing tonight, but 2 at the next meeting, then it makes sense to vote tonight, right?
I would think so. I mean, I don't mean to disenfranchise the public, since that seems to be our word tonight, but I think how we choose to run our committees and stuff like that, I don't think it's, I don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think that's really a public question. It's about how we're going to do our business, whether we have committees of, 3 committees or 6 committees, whether they meet in the morning, they meet at night, whatever. That's just about us doing our job in a non-board, in an unofficial capacity. I mean, at that point, we're not a board, we're just a committee. And so I think I'm not sure that the public's feeling about whether or not we should meet once a month, 3 times a month, how many committees and when is really a matter for the public to have bearing on. It's how we, as a board, decide to organize ourselves and get our work done.
They just want us to do the work.
Right.
Right.
We're accountable for them for the product of what we're doing, but I think in terms of scheduling and coordination and those kind of things, more about logistics of comprising those committees, I think it's for the board to figure out how we want to put ourselves together.
So first, can we vote on the move from Monday to another day? How would we do this?
Are those the two items that we would break out of this? The
Right, are
day
there
of the
any
week
others?
The
and
day of the week and then
yeah,
the committee
I would agree with
structure?
that. I agree with that.
All right.
I would, for the days of the week, there are other implications besides just the board members, so we may want to do a little bit more time on that, because there are HSAs that may be meeting on a particular night that would have to reschedule, or there may be other employee meetings. For me personally, the Monday works well because I do travel, so I can travel Tuesday morning through Friday day. I don't know how it is with other people, so there's a
I'm getting a general feeling that people don't want to move the meeting.
Well, let's vote on it.
Can we just,
How
can
about
we just
straw poll?
go with the vote?
Yeah, we'll vote. If we're deadlocked, then we'll
Yeah,
come up with another date.
yeah. Move from, I guess we're voting on moving it from Monday to another day. Shall we break it out that way?
Why don't we just vote on having it on Monday?
Okay.
Could I just ask a clarification first? What, other than allowing board members to have more time to review the material, is there another reason why we're changing the date, just so that we could be more informed on that?
Not really, except if we have a very late night on a Monday and having it, Tuesday the rest of the week. A little easier to recoup if that late night is on a Thursday. But that shouldn't be your decision-making process. But if you ask me if there's any other reasons behind it, I would say that would be. For board members as well as administrators.
How about, what if the vote is to reaffirm the board's intention to meet on Monday? If it passes, that's it. We don't have to debate Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. We just reaffirm that we want to stay on Monday.
Should we just go with the raised hands?
And if we say no, if that is defeated, then we can debate what day.
All right. Okay, who would like to meet on Monday? Raise your hand, please.
Stay on Monday.
1, 2, 3, that's easy. Done. All right. All right. Then let's move on to the board committee structure.
Can I just make this suggestion? Well, let's go with the board committee structure.
All right. Who would like to do a 6-month trial of the board committees? What's that?
No, this should be a voice vote.
Okay. Well, either way. Who would like to do a 6-month trial of the board committee structures suggested by Dr. Schiff? The three committees. All right. Would you like to?
Yeah, Jerry, do it.
We can just take a roll call. We can get everybody on the
Do a roll call, please. Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski?
Here.
Or yes or?
Yay or nay?
Oh, quite honestly, it doesn't matter. I mean, I abstain.
Mr. Gillette?
No.
What is the question?
Whether we're going to move to the board committee structure suggested by Dr. Schiff with 3.
Excuse me, 1 second. Abstain means no, right?
That's correct.
Well, no, I don't want to say no.
Well, if you vote abstain,
Actually means that you concur with the vote of the majority. That's what
No, it doesn't.
yes, it does.
I'm not
It's
saying no.
not a vote.
Not a vote.
It's not a vote.
It's not a vote.
But you
Right.
still need okay.
It's not a no vote. I
And
mean,
at
you-
5.
It helps.
we could end up
I think you
3 to
have
2
clarify that the board
with a bunch of
members
abstentions.
understood what the
Okay,
motion
very
was.
good.
We win.
Just to clarify.
I mean,
we are-
I just don't know.
Hang on,
I mean,
hang on, that's all right. To clarify, we are voting on changing the board structure to the present for 6 months to the board committee structure suggested by Dr. Schiff. You can vote yes, you can vote no, and you can abstain if you don't mind either way. All right? An abstention just means that,
It's not yes, not no.
it's not yes, not no.
Revote then. We'll
All right, is that all clear? All right, Mr. Eckert, would you like to start again? Please.
Mrs. Bogacheski?
abstain.
Mr. Gillette?
No.
Mrs. Haas?
No.
Mrs. Haley's not here. Mr. Kinst?
No.
Mrs. Lay?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Paget?
Yes,
It's 4-3.
thank you.
What does that mean?
You got your vote?
No, I think what it means is there's significant board support for something. Half the board want, right, to have something. So I think you can go back to the drawing board, Dr. Schiff. What does that message tell Dr. Schiff? What should that tell him? That it's done forever?
No, this is
6 months.
6 months.
6 months.
So we just approved a 6-month trial of that,
Correct.
a 6-month pilot of that committee structure.
And may I
That's my
just say that-
understanding of the board's action with this
Right.
vote, that we are implementing a 6-month pilot for a restructuring of the committee process to 3 standing committees as outlined in the Building on Excellence plan.
No, I think you need a majority of those voting.
Do you need the majority of the votes voting? So if there are 8 votes,
There weren't 8 votes.
abstention is a vote.
No, it's not. Abstention
It's
is not a vote.
Okay,
It is, I'm not participating.
okay.
Motion passes.
Give it 6 months. We'll try it on. If we hate it, it'll go away again. All right.
May I suggest that as a result of the vote, that the members of the board communicate to the president their interest in serving on particular committees, ranking 1, 2, and 3 each of the committees, so that the board president is informed on committee selection.
And if you have particular worries about this committee structure, please express them, so we can pass them on and see if we can't keep things rolling.
Because then by the next board meeting, we can get some tentative dates going, if you're able to communicate to your colleagues within a week and a day, that we can get things rolling.
Is there any more discussion on the?
I would just suggest one thing. Even though we're not changing the day of the week for the meetings, having 2 meetings back-to-back was consistent with the committee of the whole process, work session and then action meeting. What I would suggest is that we don't do them back-to-back, that we wait a week in between. Is there any dissension on the board for spreading it out, having a week in between?
I think if the point is to provide better action on approvals and actual
Yeah.
formal activity, I think it's much more appropriate to be
We have to
alternating
spread it
weeks.
out.
Yeah.
Would you like to vote on that, Greg? We can.
Did we approve a schedule at our reorganization meeting, a slew of dates? And now you want to prepare another set of dates and we'll vote on it next week?
Sure, and I believe that what the board approved was I think we approved the action meetings. We either approved the action or the work. I didn't think that we approved both, but I can go back in the minutes and check. You think we did both?
I thought it was just action.
I'm not certain of that. I'll go back and check. But my intent is that if we're going to have 2 action meetings, having them one right after the other minimizes the opportunity to take
It's very
appropriate
similar.
action in a timely way.
It's very similar to our current schedule where it's either the first and third or second and fourth of the Mondays of the week. And so instead of going alternating between work and action, you have 2 actions.
Well,
But there's a week in between.
We're on second and third now, except when a holiday or something prevents it. What we approved at the reorg meeting was second and third Mondays.
Second and third?
That's
Then
what
it's
we
not an
approved.
issue. Then it's not an issue. It wouldn't need to change.
Those are the current.
But you
I'm
want,
sorry,
like-
not second and third. If it was second and fourth, excuse me, or first and third.
No, we
need
approved
one.
specifically second and third.
My suggestion is that if we're going to 2 action meetings a month, then we spread it out, so
Yeah,
we have a
that's
week
fine.
in between.
Just
I
vote on that
I'd
next
like
week?
to see the dates, because there's some special
I'll
holidays and
put
stuff.
all the dates on it, and the board can approve formally those
One,
dates.
one issue, and maybe, Tom may be the only other one affected by this, I don't know, because of travel. If we go to January in this format, and then we revert back, maybe we can agree not to change the dates again. In other words, because by doing this through January, what does that leave for the rest of our term? If the dates change again, people have to do some planning. So all of a sudden in January we decide not to do it. In February the dates will change, and that is going to create all kinds of.
As I understand it, the pilot program is for the committee structure,
Right.
not the meetings.
The meetings we could do either way.
Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Dates can remain.
So the meetings. The only other thing is, there was some value in the work meetings in terms of the discussion and the committee reports. We're still going to include them,
Yeah,
right?
we would still have discussion items. I don't
Okay.
want to say that we would eliminate discussion items. It would just be part of the regular meeting. But we would formally take action at both meetings,
Which generally we
which
do.
we're doing anyway, basically.
So, anything further? All right, I think we're ready to move on to board committee reports.
I forget what I was going to say. Let me go first because I forget what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Mr. Gillette, if you'd like to go
Thank
first.
you, Dr. Patcher. The Finance Committee met earlier this evening across the hall to discuss the state aid. As the public may know by now, Hillsborough will be receiving an additional approximately $1 million in state aid we're going to be receiving it. With that notice, we received some guidelines from the state on how that state aid can be used. We discussed the options at the meeting. We expect to use the state aid for a combination of budgetary items and tax relief. I asked Dr. Schiff to recommend to the Finance Committee a proposal for how he plans to spend the budgetary items. And we'll have more on that soon. Thank you.
All right. Mrs. Haas, would you like to go?
We had a meeting on policy this morning, and we discussed all the policies that are going to be on for second reading today, hopefully to be approved, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy, and all of the ancillary policies that go with that, the concussion testing and return to play policy and regulation. I'd like to thank the public who provided about 40 comments online to the request for input for the harassment, intimidation, and bullying policies. Many of the comments were very thoughtful and helpful. We also have a bunch of policies that are on for first reading today in relation to academic standards, Title I, bilingual education, services to non-public schools, political contributions and contributions to board members, community use of transportation, and bonding. All of those will be on today for first reading. If people have any questions, they may feel free to ask. Policies, we also reviewed some policies that will be brought out for July 26th for the first reading at that time. Some of these have been updated to remove outdated legal citations, such as the duties of the superintendent, school-level planning, employment of substitute teachers actually has some impact that we'll need to discuss, the use of electronic communication and recording devices, which we're still considering, actually the administration is still considering, and policy on the use of physical restraint. The big news for the board members is that policy bylaw, actually 142, can now be updated because we've received the guidance on a criminal history record check that all board members are required to have. And I believe Jordan has some forms for us to fill out. After we get those forms, we're going to have to go online, set up appointments, and get our fingerprints done. And I think we had a discussion today about whether or not the board would reimburse on this fingerprint, and that would be open for discussion, but the recommendation would be that the board reimburse. Some other policies that we discussed, actually discussion items, Greg had brought up at the last meeting the behavior of people, of adults on class trips, and I had researched there are several policies that relate to social events and class trips and inappropriate staff behavior. But Greg just gave me a copy of a policy from another district that actually has it spelled out. So I think we'll bring that well, whatever committee will be discussing that, can discuss that at their next meeting. And, we also discussed random drug testing, since that was brought up, and we will hopefully have a report done in August about that, and hopefully can review that again as a board shortly thereafter. So that's it for policy.
Thank you. Mrs. Bogaczewski?
On July 14th, we discussed the Personnel Committee, the creation of jobs for the ED jobs, job description for ed jobs, personnel agenda items that will probably be discussed on Tuesday. Update and hiring of key positions, the vice principal for the Hillsborough High School, district supervisor of literacy, the CAP program, which is Children at Play. I know we discussed a little bit about possibly changing the name or tweaking it a little bit. The ABC anti-bullying, I understand that the same woman is going to help us out with that. The Read 188 at ARIS, and the HMS clerk, and we also discussed the library assistants.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pulsifer?
Negotiations Committee did not meet.
Mrs. Lay?
The Facilities Committee met on June 30th, and we discussed 4 agenda items. The first one is board office restructuring, and that would include painting, getting a conference table. We have like a makeshift, put together 2 tables, like in a T shape, and replacing a 20-year-old rug. So I wanted to show the board that the conference room would be in this area. It's across the hallway from the central office. And these drawings were provided as a gratuity, like just a service from Samjin Architects. So the Facilities Committee is recommending that the board approves of the changes to the central office. And the reason why is I would like to explain the philosophical reason for this. That when this is a representation. Are you having trouble hearing me?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just agreeing with what you're saying.
This is the central office represents our school district. So when you see an environment that shows respect for the Kate Shaughnessy, who deals with confidential matters, and her office is then moved to an area where she can have privacy. When we have a conference room that actually fits all of the administrative staff, that shows respect to them. So that's why the Facilities Committee is approving this improvement to the central office and making that recommendation for the rest of the board. Yeah, pass it around. And then we had a presentation by Samjin Architects. He's the one who provided the complementary plan. And we discussed PPAs, which are power purchase agreements. And he also provided some strategies, such as creating a consortium with 3 to 4 towns so that we could get better deals for our kilowatt prices, the energy prices. The third item was to talk about an RFQ, which is a request for qualification, and that's to look for architects who have knowledge of PPAs, who have LEED certification, who understand the green initiatives, and ESIP, which is Energy Savings Improvement Plans. So this is pretty much in line with the suggestions from the 100-day report. The fourth item is we actually looked at the demographic study results by Whitehall Associates, and that will be presented in more detail in the August board meeting. I can summarize it in one sentence. The bottom line is that the decline in the birth rate in Hillsborough is compensated by the developments that we have. So the net result is not much change in the demographics in our town, and therefore we don't really have to make any major decisions. So there are some towns in New Jersey that had a decline in birth rate but didn't have a net gain in development. Well, net student gain from the developments. So therefore, some towns had to close down a school, but this won't be the case for Hillsborough. That was a long sentence, but anyway, that's basically the results of the demographic study. And as the facilities chair, I'd like to thank Triangle Home and School for their generous landscaping project at Triangle School, which will turn 50 years old. It's a great example of what can happen when you have different groups in your township come together. So their beautification committee chairperson, Lillian Marcus, collaborated with the rec department and our own facilities director, Dave Fresco. We also had Ken Shearer from the Bellmead Nursery create the proposal, and there are now 70 shrubs around the flagpole at Triangle School and 36 trees. And they've included the park bench that Triangle School won when they tied with Woods Road School for the anti-idling contest. So a lot of groups collaborating together and with a very nice outcome. So as I said before about the central office improvements, the physical surroundings reflect the pride that we have in our students, teachers, and schools.
Thank you. Dr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. The Curriculum Committee met on July 6th. We approved several textbooks, one for two for social studies, one being a new college-level economics book for the new full-year AP programming, economics, which I was happy to see. A new book for a new proposed course, or new course that's being implemented in journalism, and a new world history book. We discussed a variety of issues and a variety of initiatives that are going on, including NCLB monitoring, the Gifted and Talented Steering Committee, a lot of curriculum writing that is taking place next year, especially in the areas of science and math. This is a very good news because we will have our curriculum updated to the latest, not only state standards, but the state of the art and curriculum in those two very important subject areas. We talked about the summer enrichment program. We talked about a writing lab pilot program, and some significant discussion about professional development, including the establishment of the Teacher Leadership Academy, which I believe Dr. Schiff referred to in a little bit when he talked about teachers teaching teachers. And so they're going to start putting in implementation some of those things. One of the most interesting things, and the item that took up at least half the meeting, was a demonstration by Dr. Schiff of some new technology, new curricula in this case, it was on the iPad. This was a math course that's published by McGraw-Hill, and he showed us a lesson or two from the course. And I have to say, if this is the future state of electronic textbooks, this is great news. This textbook was very interactive. In fact, I don't even think you can call it a textbook. It was a learning system. When the student had trouble, they could touch a button and a professor came on and explained things. And while the professor was talking, the problem was being worked out. There's chances to do all kinds of problems. The system gives you feedback. And interestingly enough, all of the students' work can be transmitted securely to the teacher for evaluation. So this was a very, very interesting interactive textbook, and the price point for this is very, very promising. And this is still, very new material, very new stuff, but it was very exciting. And Dr. Schiff talked about the possibility of running a pilot project in this. I think it was 9th grade algebra?
Looking at algebra.
Algebra.
Looking at possibly at 7th
7th grade. In any event, I think we were all genuinely impressed by what we saw, and the committee did, I think, lend its endorsement to the idea of running a pilot and learning more about this as we go along, and that was really the exciting part of this, and I look forward to the day when we can showcase this to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is any questions from the public regarding board committee reports? Is name and address, sir?
Gene Robbins, I work for the Hillsborough Beacon. Mr. Gillette, will the money that's going for budget relief somehow be incorporated in this year's tax rate or the budget tax bills that will be going out shortly?
Well, we discussed that. That is one of the options, but as like many things in Trenton, it's one of the options that you can't actually do. Logistically, it's not possible for us to do that. The deadline is, I believe, today, and that's already been filed, if I'm not mistaken. So there was no possibility to do it in the 2010-2011 school year. I'm sorry. In the 11-12 budget that passed. Yeah, the 11-12 budget that passed in April. Yeah, there was no way to incorporate the relief into that budget.
So how do you deal with that? Do you just hold it in surplus for another year?
Well, we're not going to hold all of it. I don't think. We have the ability to, after we get the proposal from the superintendent, we have the ability to spend some of that. Is that not correct? I'm looking at the superintendent now because he's guiding us on this.
Yes, that's correct. What the boards can do is any monies that are unexpended at the end of the school year roll over into excess surplus, which then provides property tax relief for the 12-13 school year.
So the state aid that we're getting now, the people will not see until when?
Well, that depends upon the decision-making of the board, but earliest would be the 12-13 school year, 12-13 tax year.
All right, seeing no more questions from the public, is there any questions from the board regarding Mr. Pulsifer?
Judy, just for a point of clarification, you mentioned a policy regarding, I think first you said adult behavior on trips, but then I think you said something about staff. Is this staff only, or would it also cover chaperones, and basically any adult who's participating on a trip?
The question from last week's meeting related to chaperones on trips, but many of our policies may be segmented into teacher and support staff, and we actually do have policies both under the teacher section and support staff section that reference volunteers as well, in terms of, appropriate behavior, appropriate standards of behavior. But then we also have policies on class trips, travel excursions, and social events, which also, speak that, people are expected to behave in a certain way, and that it's, participation is not a right, may be denied. People are expected to have certain behaviors in that trip. And we also have a policy on school volunteers, and actually that needs to be updated. But be that all as it may, it goes back to 1990. And it says volunteers must be persons of known character, responsibility, integrity, must reside within the school district, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone who has direct contact with pupils must first qualify for such service by submitting his fingerprints. Nobody's obligated to utilize the preferred services of a volunteer whose abilities or interests do not serve the needs of pupils. So a little bit of each of those policies might cover the issue, but Greg actually had been aware of a policy that exists that has language, and we'll look at it.
Okay. Thanks.
Dr. Rosenberg.
I just want to be clear, based upon the question came from the public to Mr. Gillette. Greg,
Yeah.
the board has not yet decided what will happen with those monies, right?
Yes.
I mean, all of it can go to the taxpayers, some of it can go to the taxpayers, or none of it can go to the taxpayers. It depends on what the board decides. My question then is, how and when will the board get to make this decision?
Well, what the recommendation of the Finance Committee is that this be included as part of the normal budget process, which we usually start around September and October. We had some good discussion earlier this evening, what signifies tax relief. So when you say tax relief, people want to usually see an actual, reduction. In other words, we heard Dr. Schiff's report in his superintendent's report tonight, Building on Excellence, and he was committed to not going above the 2% tax levy. So does tax relief then mean some portion or up to all of the $1 million be deducted from that part of the, within that 2%? In other words, 2% of the increase in tax levy would be next year about $1.5 million, maybe 1.6. So does that mean you take that 1.6 million and reduce by 1 million right off the top, or by any portion after we see a proposal from Dr. Schiff about where some needs might be that we might need to spend some of that? And of course, the board knows that we're possibly facing charter school obligation, which we may have to budget for $1 million. We don't know what health insurance changes are in store, what we've planned ahead for health insurance over the next couple of years. We plan conservatively, so we may come out ahead, but there's always changes, so we might be behind. So there are different things like, I hope am I going in the right direction?
You're going in the right direction. I mean, there are lots of things to do with the money. Another thing that came up with the money is to relieve the pressure on class size. All of those things are subject to discussion. What I heard you say, and what I want to be sure I understand, is that the $1 million will go into the next budget cycle. So we're not going to, there's no spending of any of it now. Is that correct? Is that what your recommendation is? And does that need board approval?
It's a little tricky. In other words, there's like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3. There's a couple of different things, and I don't know if Dr. Schiff, I can pass over to you once again, just to clarify on this matter.
Yeah, the board does have a choice to spend in current year budget if you choose to do so. The board can choose not to spend in current year budget and plan for 12-13 budget. It can also hold the possible tax relief all the way up to the 13-14 school year. So there are multiple options that are available for the board's consideration. And my recommendation to the Finance Committee was we need to go through a deliberative process, take a look at all options, that all board members are comfortable with what all these options are, that to make a decision literally within an hour after we meet is not a prudent way of spending public funds. So we with the Finance Committee's recommendation, we would like to spend some time really coming up with some good recommendations, a variety of options for the board's consideration, and then the board can act on it.
So just to be clear, we're not going to make any decisions tonight, which I think is good, but we're not necessarily held back from spending some of this money or not spending some of this money in the current budget year.
Yeah,
You're going to come to us over the next weeks or months with recommendations.
Yes.
That's all. Thank you.
If I can, just to clarify, so there, in the guidance that the state provided, one option was tax relief for this current year. Tomorrow is the date in which the certification goes through, and that's where all the local tax levies are the tax rate is calculated. In order to do that, we would have to advertise 48 hours that there will be a budget hearing. then have the budget hearing, and then be able to update those forms by tomorrow, 5 p.m. Logistically, we're not going to be able to do that. The next option is for revising the school's 2011-12 budget. If that was, so if the board chose to take some of that money to use it for operations, it would have to go, board would have to approve it, and then it also has to go to the executive county superintendent, has to approve it to make sure that it's a fair use. And then anything that's not used then becomes excess surplus. If we don't do anything, then that amount goes into a special budget item called recapitulation of balances, which becomes part of the 2012-13 budget cycle. So if we choose to do nothing, then it goes into the 12 budget process, and we go through the normal process figuring out what the tax levy is for 2012, 2013. And then there's stipulations about parts that are not used then extend into 2013 and 14. So hope that helps.
One final question. Is there any, this money is now committed to us? The state can't, won't, might not take it back if we don't spend it?
Depends on how they wake up the next day.
That, if I could, that did enter into our discussion, and one of the options of the four major, there were some sub-options, if you will, but one of the four major options was to hold off the whole million until the 2013-2014 school year by putting it in your excess surplus. But we know what happens to excess surplus. It sometimes gets thrown away. So we took that off the table right away. So that was taken off the table. Then logistically, immediately amending the tax levy for the tax levy that passed in April. Logistically, we couldn't do it because we didn't have enough time to advertise a meeting or to have a proper public hearing with enough public here to be able to do it. It's due tomorrow morning.
So we're down to two options.
Basically two options.
Okay.
But it is $1 million more than we had before. Mr. Pulsifer.
In that vein, this may not be the right time to bring it up, but I won't be here at next week's meeting. So I would like to put in my own preference in terms of things to be considered. Since this money is about this year, and there were decisions made at budget time about things that we would like to do, or in some cases are supposed to do, but we're not. I would like some consideration for class size, which has been something we've always tried to hold to, and I think we made some compromises this year. And also world language. I mean, I think we have issues about compliance with world language, and if we can do something with some of this money to do something about those two issues, or at least consider that, and carry some of that money over towards tax relief. But I think there's some things that there were choices that had to be made at budget time that we gave up some things that I think we should have done. And here we have an opportunity to actually maybe put some of those things back. I don't know the numbers exactly what it cost, what the budget numbers were for world language, and specifically what it would take to move class size a certain amount. But I would like to ask that be considered, since that stuff had been pulled out of this budget because of financial reasons, and now that we have money back in this year's budget, we should consider those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Lang.
Yeah. Weren't we addressing class size with the ed jobs?
We do have federal grant monies, one-time revenues of that we have and are continuing to look at for class size reduction.
Okay. So.
As well as other areas.
And in this current budget, we have added teachers to help address class size.
That's correct. And we use a very formulaic approach, and that has the result of lowering class sizes.
Just to speak to Chris for a second, some of those initiatives that you mentioned, class size, also world language, some of that, Dr. Schiff, I think he's planning to get started with the Ed Jobs money, the grant. Then you're going to need continuing money in the next year. It's possible, and I don't want to get too far ahead of what Dr. Schiff's proposal is going to be, but I anticipate that his proposal may include some of the $1 million state aid to be used to continue a position past the ed jobs money, whether it's a $60,000 position or 2 of them or 3 of them, something like that. So we wouldn't need it for the 11-12 school year, but we'll need it for the 12-13 school year.
Yeah, I understand. And I don't know all the rules, but I know there are, as usual, since it came from the government, there are a ton of rules and regulations about how we can do and what we can do with the ed jobs money, and the same here. So I'm just suggesting that considering those both together and seeing if there's some synergy between the regulations around how we can spend it or where we can spend it, this gives us some flexibility on how we meet those needs. So yeah, I understand that we've already sort of earmarked some of that ed jobs money potentially in terms of class size, but given that the restrictions on the ed jobs money are different than the restrictions on this million, maybe there's a better way logistically to allot that money. So I'm just asking that we take that into account as part of that whole thing.
Yes.
Sorry.
Just to clarify, you can spend money this year by moving it here and going to the county super and using part of that state aid. If you want to give it, whatever you want to give in tax relief, then it has to wait a year.
Sure. Any other questions for the board committee reports? All right, Mrs. Lay?
Yeah, I have one for Greg. So,
Where's that paper again?
well, I'm putting on my facilities hat now
Okay.
for the money that was returned to Hillsborough. So, because we have second on our list for the capital improvement projects is the wood fern roof. And it had been recommended for replacement in 2009. So we're following the same pattern. Like we replaced the roof like 3 years after it's recommended. And I just wanted to ask, I'm asking the board if we can plan ahead so that we pay for the roof and then have 40% of it paid by the state. So if we plan ahead, somehow, I don't know the process of it, but I don't want to pay 100% for the roof. And I think that the residents would understand if we thought this was a really good use of the money and efficient use of the money, so.
Well, Dr. Schiff did discuss issues of that type in our finance meeting, leveraging a portion of this to go to a bond or something, but I think that's something that we will discuss during the budget process, because that would have to happen in April. I mean, we'd have to have, right, we would come up all through the year up to April before we have that proposal to present to the public before April, but you know what I mean, the April budget vote. So we did discuss that. We're also starting the capital reserve account, which we're going to take excess surplus and put it into the capital reserve account. But these are things I'm going to wait for Dr. Schiff to confer with his administration and give us a proposal on.
Suffice it to say, it's not a simple discussion, and I think that's definitely what we came to the conclusion after an hour discussing it before this meeting, that really we should consider a lot of different options instead of jumping at anything really fast, and including in that the budgeting for charter schools and things like that a lot of the facilities and class sizes all come into it. So everybody will put on their thinking caps. All right, seeing no more questions, I think we're ready.
Just for purpose of the minutes, the strategic planning committee has not met.
Okay, sorry. Greg got me out of sequence. All right, moving on to new business. Is there any new business from the public? Those wishing to address the board regarding new business may do so at this time. We will typically not address them now, but refer them to the administration or a board committee, one of the new 3. Is there any new business from the public? All right, seeing none, is there any new business from the board?
Should I do a legislative update at this point?
Okay.
I never know when to do it.
You,
so-
you got to get my attention during the committee reports. You can do it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now would be fine, though. Go ahead.
All right, okay. So previously, I had reported that there were 4 bills regarding charter schools. And since then, they all passed assembly with a majority. And now there's a potential of one of those charter bills going to the Senate. So just to remind everybody, the 4 bills related to accountability, how to be accountable, and authorization, who's authorizing. So it expands the authorization of the charter schools to public institutions like Rutgers University. And the third one was to allow private schools, religious schools, to convert to charters as long as they didn't teach religion. And the fourth, oh, a local control. So, and then related to that is the Eagleton Institute had a poll, and the poll showed 73% of voters would like to see local control. So that local control means that you have a say whether the charter opens in your school district. I just wanted to point out that you can go onto the Eagleton Institute to get the results yourself and just put in charter school for the search terms. But I do have the report, and it shows a very broad support that's not broken down by gender or race. It's even if you don't have children in your household, that the support is there for local control. So the bill that may go to the Senate is related to authorization. And that's very interesting. So that means that there's a desire at the state level to expand approval of charter schools. So some statistics that are important for us to understand is that half of the states, there's like about 41 states that allow charter schools, and half of them allow local school boards to approve. And there is a trend that if the school board is approving the charter school, that they are really taking into consideration the needs of the district. So this is not unusual for a school board to authorize charter schools. In New Jersey, the legislation is to allow higher institutions to approve charter schools. And I did email NJSBA to ask if there was any recommendation from the School Board Association, and they didn't respond. So I don't have recommendations to the board as the legislative representative. I'm just updating.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing no questions. We're past new business. Comments from the public regarding the action agenda. If there's comments from the public at this time, I will let the board comment during the action agenda. All right, seeing none, Dr. Schiff, we're ready for the action agenda.
I recommend to the Board of Education the approval of the curriculum instruction agenda as follows. There is curriculum writing and approved textbooks as listed. And that's it. A1 and A2.
All right, I need a motion.
So moved.
A second? All right, any discussion? Mr. Kinst.
On the attachment that had to deal with the curriculum writing, in the K through 4, people who are assigned for those, is there good representation across the district, across the multiple schools? Okay, great. And then I noticed that it's just an observation that some names were on different curricula with math and science. I just wanted to make sure we weren't unnecessarily overburdening someone or anything like that.
The teachers have to
we post for these positions, and then
Okay.
and then the supervisor chooses who he or she wants to be on the committee.
Okay. And then there was, in there was curriculum writing for the CAP program.
Mhm.
And so the funding for that, is that going to come from the CAP revenues?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call, Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski,
Approve.
Yes.
Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Mrs. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Kinst,
Yes.
Mrs. Lay,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Yes.
and Mr. Paget.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm recommending that the Board of Education approve the following personnel agenda items. The approve retirements and resignations. And we have a retirement of a business education teacher, Jacqueline Puzio, who has worked in the district since 1976. We will miss her service. Resignations as listed. Approved leaves of absences. Revised leaves of absences. And contract changes. Transfers. And appointments of teachers and long-term substitutes, school nurses, clerical assistant, lunch aides, and the 3 positions for the ed jobs, the tech trainers, coach, mentors, summer work, extended school year, ESY program, substitute teachers, as well as the summer support program, co-curricular advisors, intramural advisors, and a group change.
All right, I need a motion
So moved.
and a second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Gillette?
Yeah, I just had a question maybe for Mr. Rocco there under B5, the 3rd paragraph, the 2nd employee, in-district transfer, but I couldn't find that person's name anywhere else on the document. Are they, usually when you see like in-district transfer, then you see them where they went.
B5, second paragraph?
3rd paragraph,
Oh,
the second employee
Oh.
mentioned.
yeah, that person was previously appointed in the last board agenda.
Oh, okay.
That's
All
why,
right.
yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
Gotcha. All right, thought I missed it. Thank you.
You could actually stay in that, that location. I had a question in B5.
B5?
There was a lot of things to read for this meeting, but there was an issue. It said that at tonight's meeting, or on the agenda, there would be a discussion as to who replaces the school nurse at Woods Road.
The person who will be doing that is appointed down below, further down.
Further down?
In the
Oh.
document in B6?
B6, but the
Yeah,
next page.
B6 further down, under school nurse.
There it is. It's on the board.
And that's a new hire.
That's correct.
These nurses are moving all around.
All right, anything further? Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski,
Yes.
Mr. Gillette,
Yes.
Mrs. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Kinst,
Yes.
Mrs. Lay,
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Yes.
and Mr. Paget.
Yes.
I'm recommending that the board approve the following finance agenda items: the monthly financials, monthly bills, line item transfers, approve the agreement with Somerset County Ed Services Commission, approve the Sterling High School Shared Services Agreement, approve resolution for procurement of goods through state agency, approve cafeteria price list, summer enrichment and transportation routes, transportation bids, and approving the transportation renewals.
All right, I need a motion
So moved?
and a second.
Second.
Second?
All right, any discussion?
Take your pick.
All right, seeing none, roll call Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Kinst?
Yes.
Mrs. Lay?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Paget?
Yes.
Recommending that the Board of Education approve the following administrative agenda items: professional travel, second readings for the attached policies as listed, first reading of the attached policies, extended school year out of district placement, field trip destinations, job descriptions as listed, approving the resolution to certify the findings from the Federal Program Monitoring Report, as well as the associated corrective action plans. Motion to approve the ratification of the agreement between the HEA and the board. That's all.
I need a motion
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski?
Yes.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas? Mr. Kinst?
Yes.
Mrs. Lay?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Paget?
Yes.
And finally, I present the informational items for the June enrollments and suspensions, sorted newspaper articles, and the fire and crisis drill for June.
Thank you, Dr. Schiff. The next item is old business. If there's old business from the public at this time, you may address the board. Seeing no old business from the public, is there any old business from the board? Okay. Seeing no old business, we are going to go into executive session where action may be taken. So I'm going to read the motion. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from the portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act, resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough in the County of Somerset and State of New Jersey as follows. The following matters to be discussed are personnel and legal matters. The matters discussed in the executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
I think we anticipate being in executive for approximately 40 minutes.
After time, we'll come back and adjourn, so.
Is that to get us to vote yes or no?
All right.
40 minutes.
I need a motion to that effect.
So moved?
Yes.
And a second.
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? We are in executive session. All right, we are back in public session. Roll call vote. Roll call, Mr. Eckert.
Mrs. Bogacheski? Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mrs. Haas? Here. Mrs. Haley? Mr. Kinst?
Here.
Mrs. Lay?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Here.
And Mr. Paget?
Here. And now, Steve Fogarty, the board attorney, is going to read us a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. In executive session, we were discussing litigation involving Olga Zaretsky, who was formerly employed as a supervisor in the district and filed a petition alleging various tenure and seniority claims. And we have reached a tentative settlement subject to the board's approval. That settlement would require that Ms. Zaretsky be appointed to the position of Supervisor of Visual and Performing Arts, K through 12, retroactive to July 1, 2011. Ms. Zaretsky would give up all claims for back pay and damages from the time of her reduction in force until the present. This would conclude all litigation with Ms. Zaretsky, and this would be subject to further action of the board consistent with the terms of the settlement. So again, as of July 1, 2011, Ms. Zaretsky would be appointed to the K-12 Supervisor of Visual Performing Arts. She would forego any back pay or damages associated with the filing of her petition, and this would conclude all litigation with Ms. Zaretsky. That is the proposed settlement.
All right, I'll take a motion to that effect.
So moved.
In a second. Roll call. Is there any discussion? No, we've had enough. Roll call, Mr. Eckert.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mrs. Haas?
No.
Mr. Kinst?
Yes.
Mrs. Lay?
Yes.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
And Mr. Paget?
Yes. And that concludes the evening. I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.